Hi, my name's Angela Casey. Welcome to Edinburgh Outdoors, the podcast that explores Edinburgh's green spaces and the people in them. And today I'm in Lochend Park and I'm standing looking at a frozen loch covered in birds, which you can hear in the background. Beautiful trees and quite built up in some directions, but then there's also a lovely view of Arthur's Seat. I can see people standing on top of it. And there are some old buildings and pieces in this park, and we're going to explore it. And I am here again with our regular contributor, Hetty Lancaster of Hetty's History Walks. Good morning, Hetty, and welcome to Edinburgh Outdoors again.
Oh, thank you very much. Good morning. And quite a chilly morning, but dry and not windy. So
yeah, we're not complaining,
nice.
Are we?
No. And it looks really lovely out here as well.
It's beautiful. Hand on heart, never been here. Where are we close to? We're close to Meadowbank.
Yeah, we're quite close to Meadowbank, and then you've got the Easter Road Stadium. The Hib Stadium is just behind us. We're just about 2 miles east of the Edinburgh city centre, I guess. And this is my local area. To my great shame, I didn't discover this until I've been living there for about 10 years, because I was always walking into town to go to work. But it's a lovely little park.
And I think people come here bird watching, do they?
There's so many birds here. It's a real haven for water birds particularly, and we'll find out a little bit why as we go around and chat. Lochend Park was once part of what was known as the Barony of Wresselrig. It was just a feudal title, basically, and a portion of land that was given to somebody by the king in return for their service and their allegiance. So there was lots of different baronies all over Scotland and Britain, but there was the Barony of Wresselrig, and this was part of it, and this was the end with the loch, so the Loch End, as opposed to the other end of the barony, the piece of land, which was called the Crag End, so the sort of cliff end, which was up near Colton Hill.
Oh, so quite a big area, so not just this spot.
Not just this spot, no. And it would have gone all the way down to Wresselrig village as well, which is a little bit further east of us. And it's been carved up over the centuries. It goes back to the 13th, 14th century, I think, the whole barony of Wresselrig. So there's still a few remains of the old baronial estate. So the house that you can see just up on that slightly craggy bit, that used to be the Lochend Castle, which was the seat of the ruling family, which was the Logans of Wresselrig at one point. And now it's got an 18th century house up there. There's not really anything left of the and I say castle, more a tower house, so not like a big castle. And then the other remains of the baronial estate is the ducat, or dovecot, that kind of upside down buckety looking structure, and that's from the 16th century, and that very much you had to have special permission from the king to be able to build a ducat. So the park here has got a path all the way around, recently tarmacked, which does make it a lot more accessible for people. We've got a little play park just here as well. Now, although this is a very old area of Edinburgh, there's lots of stuff that you could talk about, but I thought, to stop me rambling on too much, I thought what we'd do for the purposes of this particular podcast is actually we'll just focus on the loch itself rather than all the things that are going on around the loch. And for any of your listeners who are not familiar with the Scots language, a loch is simply the Scottish word for a lake. So it's a small lake or a big pond.
Is it natural?
So it is, in fact, one of the only 2 remaining ancient lochs of Edinburgh.
It's an extraordinary view.
It's really, because do you know what, it's kind of weird. It's one of the things that I really like about Edinburgh. You can go somewhere to a different part of the city, and then you can look at what is really a very familiar view, because we can see Arthur's Seat from all over the city, and yet it looks very different from different areas. But yeah, so Lochend is one of Edinburgh's oldest lochs. So centuries ago, 1,000 years ago, Edinburgh was surrounded by lots and lots of lochs, most of which have disappeared. So there were huge lochs that covered Corstorphine and out at Gogar. So some of your listeners will probably know that the Meadows, the park in the central Edinburgh, used to be a loch. Much of Holyrood Park, where we were a few weeks ago, was a loch. And only 2 of these ancient lochs remain, and that is Duddingston Loch and Lochend Loch. So Lochend Loch is really very, very ancient indeed. So it's fed by burns or streams, but also underground springs. So although it looks quite small and peaceful, it's actually very cold. It's quite deep, and it has really strong currents underneath it. So it makes it much more dangerous than it actually looks. And I did come across an old story, I don't know whether there's any truth to this at all, but there's an old story about a foggy day when a horse and cart lost its way and basically disappeared into the loch, never to be seen again.
Oh dear, dear, dear.
So I don't know how true that is, but that's a kind of a great story.
It's a bit mean to laugh, isn't it? But that does sound quite good.
So, and there's an interesting other connection between Duddingston Loch and Lochend Loch, apart from being the two ancient lochs that still survive, is the skating minister. So the skating minister is that very famous picture by Henry Raeburn, and it's the minister all in black skating on this grey loch, and the title of it, I've got a copy of it here actually. So it's quite often called the skating minister, but its real title is called Reverend Robert Walker Skating on Duddingston Loch by Henry Raeburn around about the 1790s. I was doing a heritage project in this area, and I spoke to a guy called Ewan Aitken, who is an ex-councillor, an ex-church minister, and we were walking around here and we were talking about this painting, and he was like, do you know what? I don't think that is Duddingston Loch. I think it's Lochend Loch where the minister is skating, because the hills in the background don't match Duddingston Loch, but they do match Lochend Loch. And so I've brought this along today so that we could stand and have a look.
I think the hills behind him to the left look exactly like what we're looking at, don't they?
I think we'll probably be slightly further over there in this picture, but then we wouldn't be able to see because of the trees. Whereas if you go to Duddingston Loch, it's difficult to see where you would be in Duddingston Loch and get this arrangement of hills. So, I don't know, there's a little challenge for your listeners. Go and have a look at the picture, and next time you're wandering around Duddingston or Lochend, see what you think. And maybe have they got it wrong. Because they know the Reverend Robert Walker was a minister in Edinburgh. He was a minister at the Canongate Kirk, and he was a member of the Edinburgh Skating Club, the first figure skating club in the world, apparently. And they used to meet and skate on Duddingston Loch, but also at Lochend. So we know that people did skate at Lochend. And in fact, I have a painting here.
I like it when you get the pictures out.
So these are a couple of early pictures of Lochend. There aren't that many. So this is a nice one, pretty much from where we're standing. You can see, this is by John Clark of Eldon. So you can see the Lochend House and Winnie Hill, well, it's Arthur's Seat there in the crags, Holyrood Palace down there. But you can see the loch, got some people in a boat hunting, with some birds flying around. People used to come and collect the reeds for thatching. And then we've got a lovely painting here by James Skene from about 1818, looking the other direction. So you can see the Ducat there. And lots of people are sort of like skating, and people use it for curling.
It's very busy.
Very, very busy. Lots of people falling over on the ice. So a little bit similar to today. And this is one of my favourite paintings of Lochend by a local artist called Walter Geekie, who has done lots of pictures of Edinburgh. But this is really nice. And again, you've got the Ducat there. This is a roundabout the sort of 1800s type of era, probably more like 1820 actually, because he doesn't live terribly long, Walter Geekie. This would have been part of the estate land, so it would have gone all the way around.
I've got some very cool photographs of this before the trees were here. So the photographs were taken sort of mid-60s, and there were no trees around the pond at all. None of these trees are here. It was just completely...
Yeah, very bare. You could kind of see a lot better.
Yeah, you could see it in there were the maltings.
Yep.
Up where Sainsbury's is now. You could see all the way.
Yeah, no, there's some wonderful old photographs of Edinburgh, isn't there?
This is me rolling my Easter eggs when I think I was about 5 or 6. So,
what a lovely memory.
It's a really nice park.
That's the photograph. It's of me and my mum and my brother, and we're just sort of further up the hill there looking.
It's great. Something like that is what I love about this. Somebody just stops and says that. And isn't that interesting?
It is.
And she's got the photo with her.
This is a photograph that I was going to look at a little bit later.
Yeah.
You can see the maltings over there where Sainsbury's is now. So some of these changes are quite recent that have happened in this park. So, for example, there never used to be any trees. There's an old aerial photograph which is about the 1930s.
Yeah.
There's no trees really very much at all. And so they come along because a local boy drowned in the 1950s here. And so the council proposed filling in the loch to improve safety. And so the loch becomes a kind of tip for demolition rubble, a bit of a household waste tip.
Nice.
And so they try to fill it in. However, people become increasingly unhappy about that, as you might imagine. There's destruction of this local beauty spot. And so then the council comes up with this idea that they're going to plant trees on top of this landfill to create an island, fill up this space, reduce the depth, improve the safety of the loch. But of course, such is the nature of the loch, that actually this is all sinking. And so these trees are slowly sinking, and it gives it this mangrove swamp appearance. Now, some people find this a bit sinister. It feels like they should. The railings as well were introduced in the late 1990s, which was the latest drowning, another local boy who sadly fell off a homemade raft with some of his friends. And so that's when the railings were installed. The trees in the railings have made it much better for wildlife, because the railings really prevent people from getting into the loch. But it's really nice having so many birds. We've had the herons, got magpies there, got swans. There's lots of squirrels as well. I've seen robins. And I love the fact you've got lots of these just wild plants just been able to do what they like. It's not a manicured park in any sense, Lochend. So this has got yew trees, we've got ash and alder.
I think I'm really surprised by this park because your picture of it in the 50s or whenever it was, that's how you think of a municipal park. It's very bleak. It's what you expect. But actually coming here, this is like a wildlife reserve.
Yeah, it kind of is, really. Oh, you can hear the swans. So no, it's a really wild park. It is looked after by the council, so it's just a council's public park. There is also the Friends of Lochend Park, and they're a group who help to look after the park. They do like litter picking. They've started this filtration bed, and this filtration bed is different natural plants that will help to filter the water before it gets into the loch.
There's ruins of the old house up here.
Yeah, so that's where Lochend Castle would have been. It's kind of tower house. And this is the oldest bit that you can see facing us, which is the old gable end with this old chimney. And then actually most of the house itself was rebuilt in the early 19th century, and it looks more a bit like a kind of Georgian villa instead. Gosh. But you can see that it is actually on a little crag. And so just like Colton Hill and Castle Rock and Arthur's Seat, this would have been one of these little volcanic outcrops that's kind of been left behind.
So thinking through the history of it, it was a natural loch. It was in the gardens of the house. They thought about filling it in at one point, but it's been here forever.
So from the 1770s, it is a water source of drinking water for Leith. And through a whole series of wooden water pipes that ran all the way down, and it got collected in a small reservoir at the corner of Water Street, or Water Lane as it would then have been known, which is how it got its name. There's a little lane just behind the shore in Leith on the corner of Tolbooth Wynd and Water Street, and there was a little reservoir there apparently, which they collected the water in. It wasn't actually hugely successful for a few different reasons. Partly, a lot of the private owners that had built some nice villas along the route of the water pipes took water off before it ever got into the reservoir at Leith. But also Leith started having a bit of a boom time, and so its businesses just needed far more water than this could provide. It's the 1860s when they officially stop using Lochend for drinking water, and they start to supply Leith from elsewhere. But I think businesses continue to use the water from here in cooling systems and stuff like that right up until the 1920s. So the loch was bigger then. It used to be much bigger in ancient times, just like the Duddingston Loch was much, much bigger than the modern loch is now. But even when they were using it as this water supply. So actually when we get round to the end of the loch, we'll see the old pumping house. And it used to stand surrounded by water. So actually the level has decreased. And now they control the level of the water in here with the big overflow drain.
I wonder if this is a bit of quarrying.
They probably would have had a bit of quarrying around here. I mean, I think people will quarry anything locally.
There's quarries everywhere.
There has been quarries everywhere. Yeah, bits of Easter Road and stuff were called like quarry holes, and which are the names of farms. But there would have been a bit of quarrying going on around here. So there is loads of changes that have happened over the years. So I mean, this was all farmland surrounding this area right up until the 1930s. And then from the 1930s, the Lochend farm, which belonged to the Mains farm, which belonged to Lochend House, which was just over there, that is given over for council housing. Some of the first council housing in Edinburgh is built in the 1930s. And that's when this is created into a public park. And it would have been really important for public health, especially when you think how bad the air pollution would have been then. There would have been masses and masses of smoke from all the tenements, the steam trains, the factories. There's a lot of train lines going around in this area after the trains arrive in the mid-19th century. And your senses would have been, I mean, even in lovely green spaces like this, your senses would just have been bombarded with loads of sounds like the screeching and clanging and rattling, banging, shouting, and loads of smells. So today we're not really smelling very much. Actually, it smells quite nice and clean and fresh. But back in the day, you would have had smoke, but you also would have had the smell of hot metals from the iron foundries and the steel works that were in the area, the smell of wood from the sawmills, acrid inks and oils from the printing presses that would have been close by, rendering animal fat. So there was literally a tallow works just over there at Hawk Hill. All of that would have been overlaid with the heavy cloying scent of malt, which was the smell that was synonymous with Edinburgh for so much of its history, because we would have been right between two massive maltings. So the Moray Park maltings, that's now where the Sainsbury's supermarket is, at the Meadowbank shopping retail park. And there was also Robert Younger's maltings just down a little bit closer to Leith. So we'd have been sitting between these two huge maltings.
And that's a bit of a nasty smell,
It's a
isn't
really
it?
heavy, cloyy smell.
Gosh, look at all the birds.
Yeah, people love to come and feed the birds.
You get them in Holyrood Park, but I think somewhere like this I would not have expected to get the number of birds that we've seen here today.
Yeah, I think it's
Amazing.
largely because they can come onto the water, and all the trees that are floating around in the middle, this kind of mangrove-y type element that Lochend provides, does make it a safe roosting place. So this is the pumping house. So yes, so the water would have come all the way up. You can see it in old maps. The water would have come all the way up. And I think in bits of it you can still see where the pipes used to go as well. It's blocked up the window. You can see one of the old pipes.
Yeah.
Where one of the pipes used to come out, and you can see some of the stonework. So apparently before the pumping house, it was just gravity fed. So it was just gravity would take the water down to Leith, which must have meant there was no pressure at all. We're not that much higher.
Can't have been very clean water, can it?
And I guess it kind of depends where you're taking it out from. I mean, and to be honest, how much dirtier than any other water? So all of that used to be discarded land. There would have been the railway would have been running along there. So this whole area was a massive industrial spot for Edinburgh. So I do a whole walking tour of local history about Industrial Abbey Hill, which looks at some of the industries. But yeah, completely changed. Like that lady was saying, you know, when she was a little girl, you could still see the maltings, and you'd still have had the steelworks and Miller's Iron Foundry and all sorts of things going on. So I like to take the maps and then add my own stuff. So we've got Lochend with my lovely blue railways, and then all the green stars are places of industry. So you can see the tallow works and St Anne's maltings, St Anne's maltings, the foundry, lots and lots of stuff going on. So yeah, a very industrial landscape. Edinburgh had its own local manufactories. But this is a nice little green haven. You can really get a sense of the changes of Edinburgh that different neighbourhoods have gone through, from baronial estate, that's wild landscape, to being this big farm, lots of farmland, and then the industry, and then now the industry's gone and we're using it for housing. And this park, or this loch, has been here all this time with all the different changes. So Lochend, I'm very fond of Lochend Park because I did a project here, a kind of art/history project. And one of the things I did was I used to walk around and record what I was hearing. And then how would that change at different times of day? But then how would that change in the different years? So what would you hear if you were standing here like 50 years ago or 100 years ago? And I thought you could have a map of smells or something like that as well.
Well, hence that bit you were saying about all the smells and noises that people would have heard, because, as you say, when the railways were here, there were railways on two sides of the park, weren't there? And there'd have been, it's not like a railway now that zips past on electric wires.
Every now and again you can hear the East Coast Main Line coming through over there. But yeah, I mean, they literally used to be surrounded by railways, this area. In fact, that's the term, the Lochend butterfly. So some of these roads, you'll hear them being called Butterfly Way, and some of the house signs have got butterflies, pictures of pretty, butterflies. But the Lochend butterfly was actually the shape that the railway lines made. That's the Lochend butterfly. So I quite often have a little giggle to myself that everyone's thinking, oh, these are lovely, pretty, fluttery, buttery flies. And actually it means this great big hulking train track. And so that line there is that road there. So that used to have the railway running along it.
So do you come here a lot? Do you come and walk here?
So there have been years where I've come here a lot. And then there have been other years where I've just been busy doing other things. And especially if I've been busy with tours, because when you walk for a living, you then tend not to necessarily walk for fun quite as much as you maybe would do otherwise.
You go home and have a stiff drink.
Yeah, you kind of want to go home and take your shoes off and massage your feet and put them up and have a drink, like you say.
So what have you been up to recently?
I had my first client of the year and we did a 3-day. So that was my first 3 days. So we did 2 days of Edinburgh and then we did a day trip to Dundee as well. So that was probably the kind of outdoor space that I've been in, because their waterfront has undergone a massive transformation over the last few years. My client wanted to go and see the V&A and we went and did that and had a Dundee pie, bought a Dundee cake.
Oh yes.
Really interesting place. I suspect it's one of those places a bit like Edinburgh that the more you get to know it, the more you discover. I try and like to do research at this time of year as well. I try and do a lot of the stuff in the winters. I try and get along to talks, because getting to know history is an ongoing process. So I tend to go to talks by the Old Edinburgh Club and the Architectural Heritage Society, Edinburgh World Heritage, and there's loads of interesting talks going on.
I might put links to those on the blurb on the podcast because I think people might be interested in those.
I also have a small newsletter which people are also welcome to sign up to, which you can access via my website. And in it there's a section where I try and find interesting history related to Edinburgh. And how about yourself? Have you been up to anything interesting, talking to interesting people?
Well, as always, I've been doing completely different things. So I think since I last saw you, I've been up into the Pentlands with a mountain leader.
Oh my God,
who's
that must have been
talked
freezing.
about. It was really cold. But actually, it was also really interesting because, well, first off, he had a great camper van. So we sat in that to begin with. So that was...
That sounds like a bonus.
A bit of cheating because we're meant to be outside, so we left the door open. But then what we did was we went up onto Castle Law and looked at the souterrain, the Iron Age souterrain on the top of Castle Law. But you can go right down into it. It's an old grain store and they've put a sort of roof over it and put roof lights in it, so as you go in it's not completely dark. It's completely fascinating. So we went up to look at the souterrain, which was great, and I learnt about the courses that he runs and his background, and that was very interesting. And I also have been out with the Edinburgh Outsiders networking group.
I've heard of them.
It's a group of freelancers who go out once a month and just do business networking, but they're doing it while walking outside. And I've interviewed the lady who set it up, who's incredibly inspirational. Also, I've been out to see the new Lost Shore surfing centre. So yeah, I've been busy meeting really interesting people around Edinburgh, which is always a great thing. And I'm loving it and looking forward to it being a bit warmer.
It would be nice if it got a bit warmer.
Is there anywhere recently you've been that you've discovered?
It's not a new discovery, but it was somewhere that I hadn't been for a little while, and I went back to the Jock Tamson's garden.
Oh yes.
Over at Duddingston, which is just a really lovely place to walk around and have a look at. And I think you did a podcast of it, didn't you?
I did an early one there, yeah. It's a wonderful place. It's just so inspiring. I came away feeling like a new person. It was fantastic.
And it's just nice. It's just nice how it changes during the season. So, normally you think of going to gardens in the summer or the autumn, but also nice in the wintry months.
Yeah.
It's just a nice space, and it's just nice to get out to a different part of Edinburgh than the one I'm used to. One of the walks near here that I would quite like to do is the old railway lines. A lot of those have been turned into walkways, of course, which I know you did a podcast about those as well with Charlie. So yeah, there are some near here that go down to sort of Seafield, which would be quite nice. So there's the old line that runs close to Lochend. Although it's not used any longer, it's still owned by Network Rail. So it's still got the tracks. You can actually, so it passes. It's the one that passes just on that side of Lochend Park, and so it was still being used until 2017. I think it was still taking stuff away from Powder Hall. Obviously, that's been decommissioned now. So it'd be nice if that railway line could also be made into a lovely cycleway, walkway type thing, and that would connect in, because the Abbey Hill Loop is no longer used either, and that would take you into Holyrood Park.
It would be good, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be really nice.
So at the moment, I know, because we were a bit naughty, there are still railway lines on it.
There are still railway lines on it.
Yeah. Well, Hetty, thank you again. That's been a really interesting podcast. I've enjoyed walking around the loch. We've seen so many birds. It has elements of it has felt like we're in the countryside, and we've seen some great views, and again, fascinating history. So thank you very much.
No, thank you very much for having me again. It's always nice just to walk and chat and let people know a little bit more about what's on their doorstep here.
And listen to noisy
and
dogs.
Listen to the dogs. Listen to the noisy dogs.
If you've enjoyed the Edinburgh Outdoors podcast, please rate us on your podcast app and leave a review. And don't forget to tell your friends and colleagues about it too. If you know of an outdoor space in or around Edinburgh that might like to be featured, you can get in touch by email, Instagram or TikTok.